Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our second panel discussion of Big Data Days 2023. Today in the panel, we're going to be talking about one of the concepts that is very close to my heart. I recently wrote a book about it, and one of the topics that we have been hearing throughout the conference in a variety of different sessions, and that topic is data literacy. The purpose of this session is to exchange ideas, pick the brain of some thought leaders, and to make sure that you have all of your questions answered. So before I get started with a quick introduction, I would like to do a quick shout out that if you have any questions for any of the experts on this panel, please feel free to use the Q&A box that you see on the right-hand side of your screen, and I will try to moderate all the questions as well as possible. For those who are just tuning in, my name is Jan-Willem Middelburg, and I'm the author of the Enterprise Big Data Framework, and I will be the host today. And I'm joined today by three giants in the industry in terms of thought leadership. And it's a very good, warm welcome towards all the esteemed members of the panel. I would like to start with a quick round of introductions, and I would like to start with Eric. Eric, can you tell us a little bit around your background, your experience, and how you fell in love with data?
Thank you, Jan. Hi, everyone. My name is Eric from Australia. I spent my 20 years in professional career working with data when I look back. I spent 16 years, the first 16 years with Telstra, a telecom company in Australia. In the customer service space, it was all about data. It's about information, make it into action, not just insight, but action and value. And then I moved on to intelligent automation, working with digital worker. Once again, I've learned that data in a different context, especially now with the coming of the AI power solution. So I'm very excited to have this opportunity to share what I've learned, and hopefully we can expand the conversation further. Thank you, Jan, for the opportunity.
Of course, Eric, I'm very, very happy to have you again during our conference. It's always great that you are willing to come back to us. Then my next guest is Professor Dr. Lau from Sunway University. Welcome, Dr. Lau.
Hi, I'm Xiang Lun. Quick introduction about me. I graduated with a telecom degree in engineering, and later then pursued my postgraduate in Germany. And that's the time I venture into things, technology called IoT, context awareness. And that brought me to the attention of how data can really help machines and later human to understand more than what we can imagine. And I think that is also the time big data just started after my postgraduate. And once I returned to Malaysia 10 years ago, I joined Sunway University, and there I joined the computing department where we have computer science, later analytics degree, and then lately also a master's data science. But that's so exciting that we can teach students about the importance of data. And I often share with people that data is mightier than words, because with data, you can really convince people because they are facts. They are no longer just arguments. And I think that relates back to the topic of today, data literacy. So happy to be here to share with everyone.
Absolutely. I'm very excited about that as well. Just from my own personal interest, are there any specific subjects that you teach yourself?
I teach big data using cloud computing, and I also teach things like web analytics and, of course, basic programming. Yeah,
nice.
things around those topics.
Thanks so much. That's very interesting. Good. Then my third guest for today is one from one of the leading, or I would say, national prides of Malaysia in terms of experts and expertise. I'm very happy to introduce Adnan Chaudhry, who is the Technical Director of AI at Aeronine Group. Welcome, Adnan.
Hey, thanks, Jane, for the introduction. So my name is Adnan, and I graduated as an electrical engineer, but later onwards, like I went to the US for my higher studies and research. And during that time, I basically fell in love with the domain of machine learning and AI when I did my first internship in that domain at Samsung Research. So I was just like thrown into a project without a without any prior knowledge, but I really enjoyed working there. It was quite of a stretch, but then I realized that it's the domain where I need to be. And so like I basically started my research projects and also my further industry career in that domain as well. My overall experience is like around 11 years, and like with more than 5 years I've been like focusing on building AI solutions for drone data analytics. So I basically am a strong believer of like understanding the data and the domain knowledge that it brings with us, because that basically serves as a foundational uh, that's basically a foundation of towards building like successful AI solutions. So I've been like building AI solutions for drone data analytics for more than 5 years, and not only just like the AI part of it, but I'm also like building platforms that are conducive to hosting those AI pipelines, making sure that the AI that is being built out gets productized well and it's put to use for the betterment of our customers and also for our in order to make our internal use cases efficient. Yeah, so that's yeah. Any questions?
Very good, Adnan. It's great to have you on our panel today as well. So the topic that I selected for today's discussion is a topic that is called the importance of data literacy in business today. And the reason that I specifically chose that topic is because over the last year, we've seen the popularity of the term data literacy growing quite rapidly. It used to be a term that we didn't encounter a lot. It was by some early adopters, but not a mainstream term. In the last few months, we've seen a rapid adoption of the term. A lot of companies are now starting data literacy programs. They've started with education solutions to make sure that within an organization itself, people become more data literate. So I would like to start our discussion today with, before we can discuss anything, we always need to be on the same page around what do we mean with data literacy. So I would like to start maybe with Eric. If I say the term data literacy to you, what does that mean for you? And would you be able to define that a bit more?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jan. Before I jump into the answer, may I just call out one thing? I realized that among the three panelists, I think all three of us, we all came from kind of like technical background. My background was in IT, so does Adnan and Dr. Lau as well. So I would try today. So I would try to balance it out with a perspective more from the business operation perspective rather than my favorite hat, technical expert, if you don't mind. So back to your question from operation, from like say business background, I would say I would explain it in layman term. Data literacy is just all about connect the dot. What you see is, people always say seeing is believing, but what is the belief coming from? So it is all about connect the dot, the source, the upstream, we call it upstream and downstream. Any dependency, any kind of like exception. So that is the first, it is the state of awareness. Secondly, it becomes sort of like habit. And third, it is about collaboration, because people, even though they have the same number information, fact, just like when you think about lawyer, you present a piece of evidence, two sides will have different way of interpreting it. So the same thing happens at organization, especially modern organization, where things happen in split second, but then it was from different perspective. So for me, it is all about that, those kind of like three stages around data literacy. If you can start to build up that kind of like mindset, turn into a habit, and then the collaboration that allow you to work with the data.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me switch to Professor Lau for a second. If you need to teach your students class 101 data literacy, how do you explain it?
It is a very dangerous way to present, because it will end up as a 1 hour lecture. I think we can start from the word literacy. If it's about language, then it's about the ability to understand, to interpret, or even to communicate. And I think when you add data to it, it's not different. I would say someone that is data literate would be someone who can understand the data they have, and also they can interpret them accurately and now communicate with the stakeholders as accurate as possible. I think it's about that ability to present data.
Yeah. So specifically towards the presentation of the things
Yes.
that you see and get
Yeah.
from data.
So
Very
from
good.
yourself to even to the people who wants to know more from the data, you have the ability, to be literate, to be
Very good.
discussing. Yeah.
Adnan, do you share that perspective, or do you use a different definition?
Yeah, I would concur with Dr. Lau. So it's basically around like whatever domain that you're working in, you always end up accumulating data about that domain. So it's very important to first understand the data, analyze the important features, and basically based upon that, drive your decisions, I would say. Because like in a corporate, like decision making is something which is very critical, and it is like it is fundamental that we basically base our decisions on concrete facts, driven by the data, driven by the understanding of the data, correct understanding of the data, I would say. And similarly, I would like to add that there are certain processes within an organization which can be made more efficient if we analyze the influx of our data well. Like there like if we analyze the data and we find out the pain points where we can basically speed up or make our internal processes more efficient, then basically like we can basically harness the data and build AI solutions which can basically assist us in our day-to-day processes and make us more efficient in terms of delivering to our clients and customers. So that's more on the business side.
That's absolutely true. So the reason that I picked this topic for today is because every large organization I'm talking to is busy in one way or another with data literacy. Why do you think, or what would be the explanation around why this is such a hot topic in the last year compared to, let's say, previous years before? So why are we talking about this now? So let's get back to Adnan for a second. Can you share your thoughts on that?
So like I think that recently the data-driven culture is something which is basically penetrating both the industry and academia more and more, because like we previously like we have been like following conventional methods of approaching stuff, but since like we are getting more and more awareness about like the big data, machine learning and stuff like that, and this is all basically driven by the data. So a data driven culture is getting more and more popularity, as you can see. Like if even if you want to open up a small business, like there is the first thing that comes to our mind is to basically do the market research or understand the customer, which again ties back to getting the relevant data and then analyzing it. So I would say like the data driven culture is something which is getting more and more inculcated in the minds of today's industrialists and educationists, which is basically making this domain boom up more and more.
Absolutely. So let's move back to Dr. Lau. What's your thoughts on this? Why do you see a massive enrollment in students for this topic? And why is it becoming more popular?
I think first of all, the availability of the data is very different from 20 years ago. With digitization and so on, people now have access and also ability to store, to acquire. And now comes the second part. I think the technology, the techniques are also more accessible today. So it's easy now to use tools, right? That you can have access and start playing with the data. And finally, I think it's also part of the competition because more people know how to do it and no one wants to be left behind. And I think 20 years ago, you can make decision based on experience and gut feeling. Today, if you do that, you probably lose the competition. And when everyone's getting more data driven, it will boost up the awareness, which is a good thing because everyone will make better decision. I think that's the direction to go.
Absolutely. So during this conference, we had a lot of talk about the way that new technology, new solutions, there's obviously a lot of buzz around AI and the way that that is changing the lives of all of us around us. Is that also what I think you phrase it quite well. It's becoming a necessity. It's becoming something that we need to adapt to. Is that also the developments that we've been seeing in the news in the last year? Is that one of the key reasons why we are so interested in data literacy right now? What's your thoughts, Eric?
That's a great question, Jan. When we see the overnight success with ChatGPT, for example, I definitely see the correlation between data. What you just talked about was about, I would say, for me, as I talked to a lot of business leaders, what had come to their mind was very simple. They said before, in the old school, when we talk about data, we talk about structured data. We're not talking about those kind of unstructured data in the form of, like, say, free text or email, or, like, say, anything that not in the data that we can report and we end up in the dashboard. All they care was just about that. For example, very simple. For an organization of 20,000 employee, they say their HR policy was just over the top. It would take like a team of about between 50 to 80 people to cater. And they say, but never they ever can provide a good answer at the first try. So now we see that AI all of a sudden can unlock that potential. So it comes with the catch. Oh, it is about the data that you train. So how do I train? What do I need to do now? So I think that is also the segue for data literacy come back, where we say this is what we have, why we have it, and how we can use it.
Yeah, I fully agree with you on that point. And that kind of brings me towards my next question. Is the reason that I called this session data literacy in business today is because there's so much focus right now around corporate responsibility to use data in an efficient way. Why? What would be some of the best practices, and what would be some of the key reasons how organizations can use this forward? Maybe this is a good question to ask Adnan, because you're in a large company. How does Aerodyne ensure that people remain or become data literate?
Yep. So, like, the first and foremost, like, it is important. Like, first of all, it's important for the leadership of the company to basically be cognizant of the importance of the data literacy. So, because, like,
sorry for interrupting, but you're bringing up a very, very good point. Yep. How do they become that? Because that's one of the main questions that I've been hearing in the last 2 days is, we want to move forward, but maybe leadership isn't fully realizing it. But how do you start that? Because that's something I'm very, very interested to learn.
Yeah, basically that's really interesting topic. Actually, it all starts with a proof of concept. So since, like, if you want to convince the leadership, then you basically need to have like some strong arguments, and also have some samples of the results of the problem that you're trying to solve. So as like Dr. Lau mentioned, today, like, we have easy access to different frameworks and to different technologies, which may enable us to build proof of concepts quite quickly. So whatever problem that you're currently solving, you can basically look for a similar but a modified problem statement that you can basically quickly solve and build the POC around. That this is how the conventional processes look like. And the first and foremost thing is to identify the pain points within the conventional processes. And, like, this is something that you can make the leadership understand pretty easily, that these are the pain points. Like the pain points can be like some parts of our business processes might be too much time consuming, or some parts of the business processes might be too much costly. So the first step is to basically identify those pain points. And once you have identified those pain points, then you can present a solution as to how we can address those pain points using AI. And obviously, when you talk about AI, then data understanding and analysis is basically the fundamental to it. So talking about that, then you basically build up your argument. Okay, we have been basically doing this business for quite a while, so we have accumulated this much data. This data provides us some of the features, like maybe 60 or 70% of the features which we may need to build effective AI solutions to make the processes more effective. But sometimes there can be some like 30 to 40% of the features which we are not already capturing. So we need to basically, sometimes we may also need to modify the processes a bit so that we start capturing those features in our data, which can ultimately result in more efficient AI models to speed up our processes. And then having said that, we take basically a small part of it, a small part of the proposal, and like basically show a proof of concept using some of the existing toolings, infrastructures, and some data samples that we have. And that's how like we build up the case to basically convince the management. And then later onwards, like basically we start towards building on that. So first of all, you need to have a very concrete plan. What pain points are you going to address? What type of data do you have to basically build solutions to make those processes efficient? And what do you don't have? And basically then you need to basically having proven the value, then we might need to introduce sometimes slight modifications to the business processes in order to capture all those features which we need. And then
Yeah,
a small
absolutely.
POC,
So
and we let it loose.
yeah, so if I can build upon that a little bit further, the reason that we're talking about data literacy today is because you're either data literate or you're not, or somewhere in between. And one of the speakers that was giving a session yesterday said, well, it's very difficult for organizations to measure whether an organization is data literate, and there's various studies around that. But he said, well, if I look at the research that I've done, we estimate that less than half of the organizations can be considered as data literate, depending a little bit on what measure you take. And that brings me to my next key point for discussion is there an effective way in which we can ultimately measure data literacy? Because, for, let's say, reading a book, the origin of the word literacy is quite easy. You either can read or you can't. But if we just defined data literacy as the way to use data effectively and to be able to communicate with that, how would we be able to say that an organization, or let's say the majority of its people, are data literate? So let's start maybe from an academic point of view, and hear from Professor Lau on what your thoughts around this are.
Yeah, I think if you ask a university academic, we'll say, please start a PhD topic and we will find the answer after 4 years. I think if you look at the decisions they make, you probably can put in certain metrics to look at how much they have made the decisions, recommendations based on data. I think if an organization can present that or justify it, you can really have a good feeling that they are making data-centric or data-driven decision. I would probably start from there. Secondly, you probably want to look at the accessibility to training, right? I think these are a few things. If they emphasize on making sure people are being brought to up to date, right, with the latest development in data literacy, I think that's another metric. And finally, probably that's slightly harder to judge, but is there a data culture? I think that's important. Will people there make assumptions and just, blatantly assume things, or they always talk backed by data that they have? And that, again, is probably observable. I'll probably start with these 3 points. There are definitely more. That's why let's start some PhD topics. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So I might apply for this PhD. So
I think it's timely because that itself is a data literate approach of making those observation. Yeah.
I think it's a very good point. One of the key phrases I always like to use when it comes towards data literacy is that if somebody brings up an idea or a plan or some kind of proposal, I always ask the question, do you think this is a good idea, or do you know that this is a good idea? Because that difference in wording kind of means that do they have the facts to back this up, and are they able to communicate around it? So data literacy is important. We obviously have established that we need a few more PhDs in order to see how we can measure this effectively. But it also brings me towards the next question is, why is this so hard? Why is it so difficult for organizations to foster data literacy? Why do we need all these training programs? And what's literally the program or the problem that's underneath that? Maybe that's a good question to ask Eric.
Thank you, Jan. It is my favorite question, the why. And I can tell you right up front, hands on heart, technology is definitely not the problem. It is not a problem for data literacy, whether it's now or 10 years time or 10 years before. It's not a problem with the size of the data or the type of data or the access of the data. I can think of three main reasons that I can see more from operation perspective of why those programs did not deliver the outcome that we all hope for. I have to be honest, the very first observation that I have is about people. It is not random people. It is actually people who actually stay on those roles. Now, if you look at the social kind of like a trend, you will see how long one person gonna stay at an organization, especially at one program. If you can have that person for 12 months, that's long. 18 months, that's rare. 2-3 years, it is exceptionally rare. And in order to drive the change in, let's say, culture, like Dr. Lau mentioned earlier, it is not a lift and shift. It is not like a uniform we wear. So it is tremendous amount of effort and time. And nowadays, modern organization with non-profit, profit, or government, we do not have that patience. So I would say it is number one. What I can see, it is just about time that one person or one team stick together with one program to nurture, to see it through all the challenge. Secondly, it is about the business value. We talk about outcome, but we don't really talk about value when we when we bring up any kind of like data literacy conversation, because value, it is the ultimate measurement. It is not about how many. It is at the end of the day, it is about the value. What is the true value? Can you measure? And is it valuable not just today, at this point in time, but it's still tomorrow? It's just like real estate. Today it is billion, tomorrow is 100,000, but it is there. You still hope that for the future it will be back with 2 billions. Unlike like say cryptocurrency value. It's just the point I try to make here is we have to go back to the basic of business value. Anything that we say we're gonna make it as a program, it need to be flexible as business value change. That is the thing I fail to see from organization to organization. And last but not least, the last challenging facing, it is about the digitization intertwines with the digital transformation. So all of a sudden, people start to get distracted with new way of work, with new tools, with a lot more priority, higher priorities. So then now you say, hey, let improve the way we work now, but at the same time, their plate is full. So I think that these are the three observations I can think of to explain why.
Yeah, well, I think you're kind of hitting the nail on the head in terms of what would be the key drivers behind it, and especially the answer to the question of why this is so important. So what I would like to do next is shift gears a little bit, because what we have just done is discussed the why. We looked at why it's important. I think we all established that it's becoming more and more important. But one of the next key questions that immediately comes to mind then is, of course, how? Because establishing and making sure that an organization becomes more data literate is going to require a lot of effort. We already heard Adnan talking a little bit. It starts with leadership. But if I were to ask all of you, if you need to drive a data literacy program in an organization, is it just around training, or is there more involved? Maybe let's start with Dr. Lau.
I think training may come second, strangely, right? You probably think university will say, let's just train them. I think we should begin by bringing the awareness, demonstrating how the effect, the benefits of data literacy, so that people do see and say, well, wait a minute, how come you can do things differently? And how come you're so convincing? That buy-in is important so that people now know the potential or even the power of data literacy. Then maybe 1.5, not training yet, is a good plan of change management. I've done quite some digital transformation training and talks, and we often tell people technology is there. The approaches, best practices are already known. People can help you, but if there's no good change management plan, you can buy the best equipment, hire the best people, but the whole plan will not work. With these two things done, then you can now roll out the training, because people will come in with the right, clear vision and also expectation. And I think that will help the organization to slowly transition. Yeah, and patience must come in then finally.
Absolutely. So I think if I were to kind of summarize this a bit, because I think that this is a really good roadmap. It's awareness first, then change management,
Yep.
And then training, and then patience, obviously.
Yep.
If I can ask one follow-up question around that, is that awareness part, because I fully agree with you that that's probably one of the most important parts to start with.
Yep.
But how do you do that? Is that showing movies? Is it kind of getting people into a room and showing them some videos? How do you create that awareness? Because that is so difficult.
I think first invite them to attend Big Data Day, every round. That's important.
That's
Right? That helps.
the best comment of the entire
So
conference so
everyone
far.
here, you made the right choice. I think people who understand, who has tasted the benefit, right, the fruit of data literacy, can lead the way. They can start showing, right, how they solve problems, how they actually come up with best decision with the data-driven approaches. I think when people can do well and others who want to follow, imitate, they probably will say, hey, you can do it, I want to do it too. And I think that's the best way. Remember, I said about competition, it's the same thing. When I see my competitor doing better and I realize they are doing it through data, I will go back and say, team, what is this? How did they do it? How do we do it? So I think that raised that awareness and the need, right, to understand.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's not consultant who come and sell something next, but people who really come in, help them to understand and start planning the whole change journey. And I think they're on good track.
Yep. So
Very
I'd like
good.
to add a little bit on to Dr. Lau's point. So he has made a very strong point there, and I totally agree with that. From an organizational perspective, I think it is very important to align the organizational goals and objectives with our data literacy awareness program. Yeah, because like there are different problems that we are trying to solve within an organization, and like if we can clearly align the organization's goals and objectives with the data literacy awareness programs, then that can be a very strong source of motivation for all the members within an organization to basically start thinking towards that. And secondly, it is for the organizations, it is very important for them to hire some data literacy champions, I would say, who can like sort of drive down the correct methodologies and best practices within the teams, so that we start moving towards the right directions. So those would be like my 2 cents from an organizational perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I especially like your idea because I never heard about that before. The data literacy champions.
Yep.
If I ask to reflect on that in your own organization, do you have identified a number of people who are really considered these data literacy champions and that are moving everyone forward?
Yeah, sure. So basically, like Aerodyne was like cognizant enough of this fact, so that's why they hired me. So, so basically, I'm sort of basically driving the I'm basically the flag bearer of this like AI within the organization, and then like building teams and training existing teams to follow the best practices and the state of the art methodologies towards building effective AI solutions, which involves, as I mentioned, a big chunk of it involves analyzing and understanding data correctly and deriving correct insights from it.
Very, very good. Let's switch quickly to Eric to hear your thoughts around this.
Thank you, Jan. I totally agree with Dr. Lau and Adnan around the point around awareness. I think it is the at the beginning of any journey, the awareness, the buy-in, and the advocacy. I only want to add one more point, more like kind of like practical tips that actually I apply. So back to your point, Dr. Lau, you mentioned about, let's say, competition. Use it as the canvas to drive that kind of like that need, that urgency, the sense of urgency. But from over my work in telecom, in the global customer service, because with that kind of like industry, you rarely see how other your competitors, how others have done it. So the way we work, which is more like around, we organize kind of like what we call ride along session virtually, where we basically share across teams like around the region, or like a couple of teams from different part, discuss about, like say, something very similar, like say, how do you handle like say customer, and how you present it to the executive, how you influence the technical service teams. So basically, along those conversations, you will be able to immediately pick the one that use data and be able to tell the story with data and enrich it with data. Yeah. So that is become, let's say, the example, the gold standard. And along the way, because we start with that kind of like culture. So when Telstra, they start to jump in the NPS, the program, where this all net promoters promotion score, the Australian team got beat up badly by our peer from Philippines, for example. It was just because those who can use data and willing to take the lesson learned from the data and bring to action fast, quick, you will see the outcome. And I think it is interesting that the more people get into it, the more they see the information, the data, the lesson, and the outcome, the more they want to be better. And I think it is it serves the purpose of awareness through action.
I would like to build a little bit around what you're saying in terms of lessons learned, because we just established a roadmap for, let's say, becoming data literate with the awareness, change management, doing the training, and a little bit of patience at the end. But the key point that we haven't discussed yet is, well, what are then the key challenges? So why are there any misconceptions around data literacy? Are there any challenges we would need to overcome in order to make that work? So let's get started with Professor Lau. What would be your views on that? What are specific challenges that we would need to address in data literacy?
I think that's the reason why I put patience as the last part of the journey. I think I've seen many, many maybe overstatement, but I've seen people who try to embark on the journey, especially at the very beginning of big data, they end up quite disappointed because they don't get the ROI, right, as in business term. But it's just because they kind of relied on technology and techniques, not understanding that data science is a journey, right? I think that patience is quite important And secondly, people may also assume if I just have everything in precision, I will naturally get the result. They forgot, or maybe no one tell them, it's also an incremental journey.
Yeah.
You will see results that increasingly helping you to get better. And that's why I think being able to highlight these two things, and they are willing to allow this to happen. Now technology can come in, the talents can come in, and of course you need someone who can, lead the journey.
Yeah.
And probably that leads to the final challenge. The talent shortage is still a challenge.
Yeah.
You have people even trained with the tools, but can they now look at that abstract value level, right? To see the big picture.
Yeah.
I think that's why this kind of forum here, the Alliance, help people to share, to kind of lead the way, and that can really come down to the future talent. And I believe that's the way to help the industry to embark on this sooner.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in terms of talent, and because obviously data literacy is a people aspect, I thought it would be interesting to kind of ask you a bit of a philosophical question. So there's no right or wrong in this, but it's more of kind of like a statement. And the question here is, can everyone become data literate? Or are there people who are lost causes and will never be able to become data literate?
Yeah. I think majority can, right? Because they realize, partly some will notice that they can do better and they wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to do even better. Yeah. They will definitely embrace. These are the leaders. These are the people, first adopters. There'll be people who feel they are forced to do it. These are people who saw the competition. Like what Eric said, it's actually a competition. The Philippine teams, right?
Yeah.
They also say, I have to catch up, so they will follow. I think sadly the third group will be the minority that still maybe stubborn, maybe just not willing to change. And I would say these are people who will be left behind. They may not disappear, but they definitely will meet bottlenecks because everyone is now running, 3 times faster while they are still moving at the same pace. So maybe in that case, they eliminate themselves.
Yeah. Absolutely. I fully agree with you here. It's kind of like the early adopters, the majority after that, and then the trailing laggards that are maybe never ever going to get it. The reason that I'm bringing up kind of the word ethical dilemma and ethics is because throughout this conference so far, we've been talking a lot about data literacy in relationship to the topic of ethics. And I'm quite sure, since you're all from different parts of the world, that not everyone has seen every session. But especially yesterday, we've seen a lot around the effect that data analytics, big data, artificial intelligence can nowadays have on perception. So I think we're all familiar with fake news, people who use data for the wrong reasons. We all have seen photographs online that were clearly generated with a particular political message or political or specific activism message. And that's also, of course, a way in which data can be used. So my next key point is, should data ethics be part of data literacy? And if yes, to what extent? Let's start with Eric for that question.
First thing first, I would say this time I have to be opposite to you, Jan. I would say no in terms of data, because data, if it's just pure, if I am a purist in computer science, data is just something we create with computer. So there's no ethic, there's no real human aspect around it, no real context. Sure, there's a certain intent. However, because of that is the bad intention, then that set of data is definitely going to be harmful to the audience. So for me, it is more around the legal aspect, rather than another label on the data.
Very interesting.
That's just my.
Yeah, that's very good. Let's move to Adnan. Do you agree? Is it a separate issue?
I would disagree a little bit. Like, I think data ethics should be part of data literacy, but uh, but the thing is, like, whoever is basically utilizing the data, like we impose no limits on you to utilize the data that you need. But like, while you're collecting the data, you can have some kind of documentation or some disclosures in place, that if I am obtaining some personal information, or if I'm obtaining some information about a public property or a private property or anything, like, we have effective measures within our organization to make sure that the data is secure and it is only being used for the intended purpose. So this is something which every consumer of the data needs to make sure that whatever data that they are consuming, they are making sure that it stays safe. They have like sufficient infrastructure and processes in place to ensure that the data is secure and it doesn't leak out for any unintended, or I would say destructive purposes. So if that agreement or disclosure is in place, then I think that you can use any kind of data, and then like you can basically let it loose. But like, I think this some kind of disclosure, or I would say some SOPs, should be in place with regards to the consumer of the data.
Very, very interesting. So we have 1-1. Professor Lau, what's the final verdict?
I probably will lean towards what Adnan say, but I wouldn't say data ethics is part of literacy, but it must work hand in hand with data literacy. Because the ability to read doesn't mean you are reading the right thing.
Correct.
So you need to add on the additional, like, moral values, beliefs, right? That shows it brings good to the society. If you think that is called part of literacy, then yes, but I see it as something that must go along. But on the other hand, it's a very interesting point. Maybe that's why we should also then make it part of literacy. Means if you want to deal with data, we all will, but like the Boy Scouts will say, we are committed, right, to do the right thing with data. With big data comes big responsibilities. Yeah, because if not, often people are not so worried about the ability to gather and process and even use the data for own benefit. People are worried about institution may abuse the data, right?
Yeah.
All the worries, all around, for example, companies like Meta, maybe governments or countries, that people are worried what they'll do with data is never about the technology, the ability, but more like whoever that owns the data, what they can do, or are they protecting the data enough? Therefore, putting this together, no matter how you call it, they have to exist together, or else it can actually be quite dangerous.
Yeah, it's good. So I think the final verdict is 1.5 versus 1.5, or somewhere in between. Good.
May I just quickly add one more thing? Something that's very timely that Dr. Lau mentioned earlier. I really like your viewpoint around data literacy and the moral value. This is really struck me hard, because this is not just on paper. Literally now in Australia, at least, and I'm sure in the world as well, voice scamming is real. So basically, all it takes got to be about 3 seconds of your voice, and then the data model can replicate the sound of your voice. So even like, say, a step further, I just read on the news a few days ago, Apple now will make it happen for you. For, like, say, if you lost a family member, you can replicate that voice with Apple apps. And all of a sudden, I think, oh, hang on, is it data literature? When we are, as a user, we sign up for Apple policy. Yes, we do. We agree. They promise they won't mishandle it. But the moral story, the moral value, and really think about it, is really, really put us in a very tough spot.
I absolutely agree
around
with that.
What is next. So that's why there's no moral here. It is legal. It's not about should it is legal or not legal.
It's a very, very interesting question. I'm going to leave that ethical decision to any governments. The time is flying by very, very fast, and I can probably talk with the four of us for another hour easily. but I've seen on the side also quite a number of questions coming in from the audience that is listening in. So if it's okay, I would like to moderate a few more questions before we need to go towards our next sessions and our next lineup already. The first question I'd like to discuss, and I'll put it on the screen right now, is from Mohammed Hafiz. And he's asking, how does data literacy empower business to make informed decisions, drive innovation, and ensure data security, as well as gaining a competitive edge in today's data-driven landscape? Let's start maybe with Adnan, being from corporate yourself. How does data literacy empower business?
Yep. So, like when you're operating business, you are basically coming across like different amounts of or different types of data as part of your regular routine procedures. The thing is, like, if you don't have proper data literacy practices in place to basically make use of that data and like understand like the progress of the business, then as we have already discussed in the past 45 minutes, that maybe number one, the competition may overtake you. Number two, you may be like lagging behind in terms of adopting the latest technologies and frameworks. So it is very important for like companies to have data literacy practices in place so that they can continuously monitor that where which parts of the business are doing well and which parts of our business processes require like more improvement, and how can we improve them, and what are the different features which are making some parts of the business processes a bit inefficient. Is it like the time required to complete the process, or is it the costs or the resources that we need to invest in? And whether like once we basically analyze the pertinent pieces of data, it can definitely give us insights into how can we optimize our different parts of our business process pipelines.
Good. I think that's a very, very concise and very realistic answer to that specific question. Good. We still have time for one more. Next question is, and I think this question is going to go to Professor Lau, given the subject. It says, education systems has a lot of focus on data literacy through traditional programs such as computer science. However, the challenge is giving birth to a wider group of data literates in the STEM industry, so science, technology, engineering, and the medical field. I think that acronym stands for. Like engineering, there are many STEM courses running the course of birthing to obsolete graduates. Is there enough being done at the education policy or curriculum planning level? So it's quite a detailed question. Yeah, look forward to hearing your thoughts.
I think the statement, right, is a accurate observation. Many curriculum planning focus more on the field itself. Mm-hmm. And I think at this age and day, we need to understand the needs of the industry. And I'm an advocate of, integrating basic data science, even some computational skills for every field, because I think the next generation of people working, they can be an accountant, they can be maybe healthcare worker, but they must be, for example, data literate or let's say AI literate, because they will be users of all this technology in their very own field. Therefore, for example, here we started engineering about 1.5 years ago, right? And we have made a conscious decision that things like AI, IR 4.0, that means data literacy related subjects, has to be part of the engineering program. In the classic one, they may just probably expect them to apply in their final project, but we think even as soon as year 2, year 3, they must be exposed to some of these techniques and learn how to use modern tools to also help them to achieve engineering related problems by using data-centric approach. I think this will come because more people see this, and many of us are working closely with industry, and industry are telling us all these are needed. Yeah. And similar to my previous comment, whoever that think that change is not necessary, they might be the one that will be left behind. Yeah.
I think that's a great way to kind of recap this session in saying that data literacy should be part of every form of education, no matter whether it's IT related, but also if it's the medical, maybe even the social sciences. Who knows?
Yep.
That might be one of the key takeaways. Gentlemen, it's been a real pleasure to pick your brains on this topic. Unfortunately, we're getting out of time, and I already got a nudge that the next speakers, of which Eric, by the way, is going to be one, are ready for the next round of presentations. So I would like to thank everyone for participating in this panel. It's been an absolute pleasure. I always really like hosting these sessions because it gives so much fresh perspective and so much good kind of advice in a very short period of time. So thank you so much for contributing your time. It's really, really been a pleasure.
Thanks, Shane.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jan. My pleasure.
Absolutely. Good. Speaking about upcoming sessions, it's my great pleasure to introduce our next set of speakers. We had 2 sessions, but unfortunately, Professor Angela is down with COVID. So we had to cancel this specific session. So Eric, you will get the full audience in the next hour. So the pressure's there. And Eric is going to talk about designing a zero-based data pitch and gaining buy-in and momentum in uncertain time. Eric is a very seasoned speaker who's been with us many times before. So I can highly, highly recommend his session and joining that as well. Thanks everyone for joining the panel. We're going to close this session now. It's been a real pleasure.